Yes, and it'll be a little while before we see the full turnout here, before we get those official numbers in. But we did see those lines all day long. Secretary of State David Scanlon predicting record turnout and saying it looks like that is what we're seeing. Secretary of State David Scanlon is here with me now live. And I want to ask you first just about the lines that we saw. We just saw those images. We've been seeing images like that all day, particularly at Winnett High School in Hampton. Is there anything about that particular location that makes it extra challenging this year, or is there any reason why we're seeing the kinds of lines there that we're seeing?
It was a challenge in many polling places today because of the number of voters that simply turned out and overwhelmed the facilities. Hampton does have some new election officials, and this is quite an election to really take on that role. And there were probably some things that could have been done to add to the efficiency of moving people through the polling places. I know that the Attorney General's office sent representatives down there to try and help them figure out some ways of doing things just to move the voters through the process. Clearly, the election is now over. We will be going to Hampton to take a look at how the polling place was operating and see if there's suggestions that we can offer for the next time around.
Sure. And, there is still work to be done, even though the polls have closed. You've said that the work for you and your office is really just beginning. Talk to me about what happens from here.
Well, we've been preparing for this day for a long time, and the ballots are out. We trained the local election officials on the proper procedures and election laws. And so the last few days for us have actually been restful, just waiting for today to happen. But tonight, in the early morning hours, tomorrow morning, the state police will go to collection points, pick up the return of votes from all of the polling places, deliver them to my office very early tomorrow morning, and then we will start aggregating all of the results by legislative district and the statewide races so that we can report the official results. Sure. Once that's done, the candidates all have the opportunity to request recounts. And we could spend up until Thanksgiving and maybe even after that conducting recounts. And then the legislature has required us to conduct audit of the ballot counting devices that are used in the election. So we will be doing that over the next few days.
Sure. I want to go back to just the record turnout that we're expecting here. The numbers that you've seen, you've been in the Secretary of State's office for a long time. Have you ever seen anything like this?
No, this was, there have been a couple of elections in the past that I've experienced that have had really high turnout, but this has surpassed them all, just in terms of the number of people that were waiting to vote in the morning. The moderators that I spoke with at a number of polling places said that they had never experienced anything like that, even though they've been doing the job for 20 years or more. And then those lines were sustained right through the day. Usually there's a let up at some point and the lines catch up, but today it was just a steady stream of voters heading to the polls. Fortunately, the lines for the most part were moving fairly smoothly, but it was an effort on the part of the voters. They exhibited a lot of patience, but the ones I came across were in a good mood, and maybe that was because of the weather. But the real people that I would like to compliment today are the local election officials.
And of course, busy as always.
Never stops.
Yes, never stops on election day.
But the local election officials, the moderators, the clerks, the supervisors of the checklist, and all of the volunteers that they had really did a fantastic job just handling the crowds and making sure that today operated smoothly.
When it comes to the numbers, have we seen registrations? Do we have any numbers on how many people registered today? How many people re-registered today?
Those numbers will be coming in over the next day or two. We do know that after there is a verification of the checklist where names are removed due to inactivity, the last time we did that a couple of years ago was 175,000 names. Those voters that just vote in presidential elections showed up at the polls today, and many of them had to re-register to get on the checklist. I would not be surprised to see the number of Election Day registrations up around 100,000.
Were there any challenges that presented? Just the number of people, the sheer number of people going to the polls today, the sheer number of people registering today to vote. Any challenges for poll workers, moderators, for your office?
The election officials were prepared. Every polling place that I visited, and I went to the Seacoast area today, the lines for registration were not that long. I did stop in Durham, which is a college town. They see a lot of Election Day registrations. They had more than 25 stations set up that were just moving voters through, and it was very, very efficient.
Sure. Any issues today at all? Any reports? I know the Attorney General's office had a hotline set up if there were any concerns. Were there any calls about any concerns to your office or to that hotline? And how are those investigated? Were there any major issues?
There were no major issues. Most of the issues that we had were related to just the volume of voters turning out, the lines, and there were a few polling places that had some issues with the ballot counting devices. Those were all addressed, and the ballots are being properly counted. So but those are common issues. Those are typical issues. Towards the end of the polling hours, I understand there was an altercation in Somersworth where an intoxicated person attacked a poll worker. I don't know any details other than that, but that's pretty much it.
And
yeah.
You know, that also speaks to the de-escalation training that poll workers went through. You know, to your recommendation that police be at every location. That was the only issue as far as any kind of violence.
As far as I know, that was
police involvement.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Is there anything else that people in New Hampshire should know as these votes are being counted on what looks like it will be a record turnout, and the word that you've been using is unprecedented in New Hampshire?
Just New Hampshire historically does a great job conducting elections. And I complimented the local election officials for the job they did, but they're the primary reason why we're successful in New Hampshire, because those individuals are elected by the people from that community, their neighbors, their family members, their friends, and those people hold those positions because they're trusted to do the job. And because of that, the people in that community have faith in the results from that community. When you consider that around the state, it is a pretty amazing process. It would be very difficult to have some type of a conspiratorial incident occur where a group of people are trying to manipulate results. It really doesn't happen here. It would be difficult for that to happen here. And so I know nationwide there is a decline in the confidence that voters have in the results that are reported after an election. New Hampshire is still holding that confidence level among its own voters. We want to make sure that we keep it there and improve upon it. So we've been working on transparency and voter education and a number of ways that we can help people understand the process and have faith in it.
And now we wait.
Now we wait. I have no idea what the results are going to be tonight, but I'm anxiously anticipating them.
We are too. David Scanlon, Secretary of State for New Hampshire, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I know you have a very busy schedule, so we really appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.